Hello everyone. This is the third part of what we talked about in the Zohar, the Soncino Zohar on page number 84. The third part really has to do with very deep conversation of what happens inside the space, inside the spot of what we call Makom HaMaskil. The space, the spot of the intelligent. All the way on the top, all the way above the brain, the space where the entire sound and vowel combination comes forward to begin the actual conversation of the word. All right. Again, page 84, right on the top. The whole world is constructed on the principle upper and lower, from the first mystic point up to the furthest removed of all the stages. They're all coverings to one another, brain with brain and spirit with spirit, so that one is the shell to another. This primal point is the innermost light of a translucency, tenuity and purity passing comprehension. The extension of that point becomes a palace, from which forms a vestment for that point, with a radiance which is still unknowable on account of its translucency. The palace, which is the vestment for that unknowable point, is also a radiance which cannot be comprehended, yet withal less subtle and translucent than the primal mystic point. This palace extends into the primal light, which is a vestment for it. From this point, there is extension after extension, each one forming a vestment to the other. Although at first a vestment, each stage becomes a brain to the next stage. The same process takes place below, so that all on this model, man in this world combines brain and shell, spirit and body, all for the better ordering of the world. All right, what does this mean? What this means is that the space that we talked about, which is the upper part, which has its entrance through the top, which moves over the top, which is the extension that the Zohar talks about, the unlimited extension, which we call Ein Sof, which is limitless potential, limitless possibility, limitless opening. That entrance comes from the highest place, and the highest place is the eye. The eyes, the third eye. We haven't talked about the other lower places, which is the mouth and the nose. You have to understand that the Zohar begins with the conversation of all. I begin with the conversation of detail of all, meaning how do we get to this highest place? And how we get to this highest place is by understanding that there is a lower world, which is written, and there is a higher world. And those two worlds have to come together in order to be a mirror for each other. In the voice, the lower world constitutes the mouth. Meaning, the mouth is the entrance into the soft palate. The soft palate is the only part of the mouth area, the internal part of the mouth, that lifts up into the high area and gives you an opportunity to rise to that area so you can connect to that extension beyond extension, brain above brain. Now, since there is the conversation of the upper world and the lower world is connected to the throat. And the throat is the danger. Because when you use the throat, you're sitting and using the lower world as a primary conversation instead of the upper world as a primary conversation. Meaning, we understand that God rules the world. And God is to be found on the top and on the bottom, meaning in the upper world and in the lower world. The conversation of man is to create a space of connection between the upper world and the lower world, and that space is the voice. That space is communication, which means once the soft palate has risen, which we achieve by the entrance of air, very, very, very little movement on the face, but the entrance of air from the front teeth past the hard palate into the area of the portal bones, which we haven't discussed, but if you read the book, then you'll understand it's the furthest place that connects via the tissue to the soft palate. Now, the soft palate will rise, and you'll feel that little tiny bit of cool air immediately, even if you think about allowing the air to enter and reach the back of the soft palate. Now look, the minute the soft palate rises, what you will get is a lowering of the tongue, which is part of the low world, an opening of the throat because the larynx have dropped. And at that moment, you have two connectors. You have the connection to the low world, which is the diaphragm, which is connected to the low world, the mouth, the throat, and you have a connection to the upper world, which is the soft palate. The air rises, and the air goes into the diaphragm. It's a simultaneous action, which means that at that very moment, you're able to connect the upper and the lower. The actual work very interestingly, is done in both places simultaneously. That also makes perfect sense because God created the upper world and God created the lower world. And the lower world is a mirror of the upper world. So what happens on the top happens on the bottom, which means the instrument, which is actually divided into the speaking, which is what we talked about last week, the connection to the word and the externality, and the connection to vowel sound, which is connected to the upper world. All of this put together will give you the palace. This is the palace, which is the vestment of that unknowable point, which is the makom hamaskil, which we talked about in number 1 and number 2, is also a radiance which cannot be comprehended. Correct. Because everything that goes on in your brain, everything that goes on in the movement of sound, vowel, intention, speaking, thinking, is really in a place that is not touchable. It's not understandable. And as much as we know about the brain in 2014, we know absolutely nothing. And we understand nothing. And we have no idea, really no idea, of where what is. Meaning, if I say to you, take the word woody. Woody, 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 and show me the exact place where that word is achieved in your brain, I don't believe that you're going to be able to tell me. And I don't believe that anybody can teach you where that is, and I don't believe that anybody knows where that is. What we do know is that the word woody now exists in your thinking in an unknowable place, yet with all less subtle and translucent than the primal mystic point. The primal mystic point is makom hamaskil, meaning that goes even beyond the idea of the brain. It's that point from whence comes all. Look, when you understand that there is no knowing of where, but when we work, there begins to be a knowing of how, then you will understand what this is. This palace extends into the primal light. What is the primal light? The primal light is beyond all light. That means above even you. Meaning when the sound is so high that you literally cannot feel the voice anymore, which means you are not part of it physically, but you are part of it mentally, subconsciously, consciously, primally, above, without moving and really involving the instrument, manipulating the instrument into getting what you want out of it from the instrument, instead of connecting to that place where is the palace, and where is the knowledge, and where is the combination and the connection for the entire conversation. From this point, there is an extension after extension. Endless, endless, endless loop of air, endless loop of sound, endless loop of being able to connect what we talked about last week, the utterance and the sound. There is no sound without utterance, and there is no utterance without sound. That connection is from the extension beyond extension. The same process takes place below, that on this model, man in this world combines brain and shell, spirit and body, for all the better ordering of the world. Meaning, when the voice is in the right place, and when your sounds and your vowels come from that unknowable, incredible palace, and are connected to the utterance of the world, of the word, to the world, then, and only then, will the lower world and the upper world be connected inside the voice. There is so much more. There's so much more. But today we talked about an important part, which is the soft palate. The height of the soft palate is 100% necessary for the opening of the throat and for the connection and the recycling system of the air of the diaphragm to keep the soft palate high. If the soft palate is not high, if the tongue is not down, if the throat is not open, you will begin to clench, you will begin to close, and you will begin to push forward, at which point you will lose, without a doubt, this connection. What was it called? I want to be exact. There is an extension to this connection, which is beyond one brain after the other, one extension after the other. The diaphragm, just as an aside for all of those who say, or who begin to say, or who state, or who are taught, that the diaphragm is the voice, and the voice begins in the diaphragm, I'll have to say absolutely and without a doubt no. The diaphragm is the connector to the height of the soft palate. The use of the diaphragm is the support system for the height of the soft palate, which is the absolute necessity for an open throat, dropped larynx, and for the ability to be able to speak without any involvement of the inside of the mouth. the external movement of that air that returns from the diaphragm, from the soft palate, right to the front teeth, right to the intention of the word, is a connector, is to keep the lower world connected to the higher world. And when you achieve that, that'll be the first part of a 3-part system to bring you into the highest of all places, keep you there, and keep your voice connected to the place of godliness.